The prison gates groaned open, and every inmate turned their eyes toward the newcomer. Whispers spread like wildfire. "He's here. The most feared gangster alive." Malakai didn't walk in like a man defeated. He walked in like a storm barely contained. His face carried the scars of battles no one else survived. His reputation had arrived before he did. Ruthless on the streets, untouchable in the underworld. But inside these walls, power worked differently. Here, killers, thieves, and monsters ruled their own kingdoms. Respect wasn't inherited, it was earned in blood. And tonight, every set of eyes measured him, waiting for the first crack, the first sign of weakness. The guards smirked, knowing what they had done, throwing Malakai into a cage of predators who wanted his head. For them, it was entertainment. For the prisoners, it was an opportunity. For Malakai, it was just another battlefield. And as the steel doors slammed shut behind him, one thing became clear. Survival here wouldn't be about reputation. It would be about war. From the moment Malakai set foot inside, he carried a target on his back. The warden had already made his choice. Malakai wasn't meant to last. Rumors spread like poison. He's not just a killer, he murdered children. Inside prison walls, that was the ultimate death sentence. Even the worst of men, the lifers with nothing to lose, despised child killers. It was a lie crafted with precision, designed to turn every inmate into Malakai's executioner. The first attack came fast, a shove in the yard, a blade flashing from the crowd, fists striking from every direction. Malakai hit the ground, blood spilling across the concrete. But he didn't beg. He didn't scream. He fought. Every punch he threw was survival. Every breath was defiance. The guards didn't interfere. They watched. They wanted the chaos. They wanted him broken. But when the dust cleared, Malakai was still standing, barely, but standing. And in that moment, everyone realized something terrifying. This man was marked for death, yet he refused to die. The prison yard was more than a place to breathe stale air. It was a chessboard. Every move was watched, every alliance negotiated in whispers, every weakness exploited. Malakai walked through it like a man among wolves. Conversations halted when he passed. Some stared with hatred, others with curiosity. The lie about killing children had spread like wildfire, but deep down not everyone believed it. Behind the fence, eyes followed him. DeLuca, the guard who dared to care. She knew the setup, knew the whispers weren't true. Yet her hands were tied, trapped between her duty and her conscience. Meanwhile, the warden's men circled like vultures. They weren't just watching Malakai, they were orchestrating his downfall. They knew the clock was ticking, and their plan had to work before his execution date arrived. In the shadows, deals were struck, promises of power, favors, and blood. Some inmates wanted to use him, others wanted to destroy him. But one thing was certain. Malakai had become the center of a dangerous game where trust didn't exist, and survival was the only currency. Whispers weren't just about Malakai's crimes, they were about fortune. Somewhere in his past, a job had gone wrong. $5 million worth of diamonds vanished without a trace, and everyone believed Malakai knew where they were. That secret made him more valuable alive than dead. To the warden, the diamonds were leverage. To the inmates, they were salvation. To Malakai, they were a curse. In hushed corners of the cell blocks, men plotted. If we get him to talk, we're rich. Others planned darker routes. Break him, bleed him, kill him, he'll spill before the end. But Malakai stayed silent. Not a word about the diamonds, not a hint of weakness. The more they pressed, the harder he became. His silence was his weapon, his final stand against a system designed to crush him. Still, the rumor grew. The prison walls shook not only with violence but with greed. And soon, Malakai realized, his greatest enemy wasn't death row. It was the secret everyone believed he carried. Among the cold faces and iron hearts of the prison, one person refused to look away, Officer DeLuca. She had seen countless men come and go, broken by the system, swallowed by corruption. But something about Malakai was different. She watched him endure beatings that would have killed others. She saw him refuse to bow when the warden's men twisted every screw of cruelty, and somewhere deep inside she felt a dangerous thought. He doesn't belong here. When she confronted the warden, demanding answers about Malakai's transfer to general population, she was shut down, threatened, warned to stay in her place. But DeLuca wasn't like the others. She carried a stubborn sense of justice, even in a place where justice was long dead. Late at night, she slipped words of comfort through steel bars. "Why don't you just give them what they want?" Malakai's reply was always the same: "Because it isn't right. Because I don't have it." Her heart told her to believe him, and as the walls closed in, DeLuca made a silent vow. If no one else would fight for him, she would. Even if it cost her everything. In prison, reputations are life or death. Murderers of cops are feared, but child killers? They're despised, hunted, marked for brutal ends. The warden knew this truth and twisted it into a weapon. The rumor spread fast. Malakai killed children. It wasn't just a whisper. It became gospel among the inmates. The lie poisoned every corner of the prison. Men who didn't know him wanted his blood. Others saw him as an easy mark to boost their own status. Every insult, every ambush, every blade that came his way carried that single accusation. Malakai denied it, his voice steady but hollow. "I didn't kill any kids. I was framed." But in a place like this, the truth didn't matter. Perception was everything. For Malakai, it wasn't just about surviving fists and knives. It was about surviving the weight of a lie heavy enough to crush a man's soul. And no matter how many times he fought back, no matter how many bodies hit the floor, the whisper followed him. Child killer, child killer. The warden's plan was working. Slowly, the lie was becoming Malakai's only identity. The general population was a jungle of predators, killers, gang lords, men who had long forgotten what mercy looked like. To be thrown into their world was to be offered as prey. Malakai walked among them with iron in his eyes. Every step was a challenge, every glance an invitation to violence. The smell of fear drew them in like sharks to blood, and Malakai refused to bleed. The first night, they tested him. A group cornered him in the showers, chains wrapped around their fists. The blows came fast and brutal, but Malakai had lived his whole life in war. He didn't fight to win, he fought to survive. And when the steam cleared, 3 men lay broken on the tiles, and Malakai was still breathing. From that day, the prison's monsters looked at him differently. Some with rage, some with respect. But none could deny it. Malakai wasn't prey. He was something far more dangerous. In the world of predators, he had become the one they feared. Behind his polished uniform and cold stare, Warden Kowalsk was more criminal than any man in his prison. To him, Malakai wasn't just another inmate. He was a gold mine waiting to be cracked. Late one evening, Malakai was dragged into the warden's office. The room reeked of cigar smoke and power abused. Kowalsk leaned forward with a smile that never touched his eyes. "I don't need all of it," he said softly. "Just half of the diamonds, and I'll make sure you live. Refuse me, and I can move up your execution date with a single phone call." It wasn't an offer, it was extortion wrapped in velvet. The warden wanted Malakai broken, desperate, willing to sell his soul for one more day of life. But Malakai only stared back, blood still drying on his bruised face. "I'd rather die with nothing than give you anything." The warden's smile faltered. For the first time, he realized the truth. Malakai might be behind bars, but he was the only man in that room who couldn't be controlled. Cage was a beast of a man, 10 years into his sentence, muscles carved from steel and rage. At first, he hated Malakai. The rumor of the child murders made him want blood. He swore he'd be the one to break him, but prison has a strange way of bending fate. After one brutal ambush in the yard, Cage watched Malakai fight like a cornered lion, refusing to fall even when the odds were impossible. Something shifted that day. Hatred turned into respect. They never called each other friends. Friendship didn't exist behind razor wire. But slowly, an understanding grew. Cage despised the system as much as Malakai did. Both had been betrayed. Both were pawns in someone else's game. One night, sitting in the shadows of their cell block, Cage muttered, "You and me, we're not the same, but we both hate the bastards running this place. That's enough." Malakai nodded. For the first time since his sentence began, he wasn't alone. In a world built on betrayal, he had found an unlikely ally. No matter how many walls surrounded him, Malakai could never escape his past. Every scar on his body, every sleepless night, carried the weight of choices that refused to die. The whispers of the lost diamonds weren't just prison rumors. They were the ghosts of a heist gone wrong, a crew he once trusted, promises of wealth, betrayals that bled into the shadows. And in the end, Malakai alone had paid the price. But the past wasn't finished with him. Old enemies resurfaced, men who had once called him brother now circling like vultures, hungry for the treasure they believed he hid. Even DeLuca saw it in his eyes, the torment of a man replaying every mistake, every betrayal. She wanted to believe he was innocent. Malakai wanted to believe it too. But the past has claws, and inside those prison walls, it was dragging him back into a war he could never win alone. And as the days counted down to his execution, one truth became clear. His past wasn't haunting him. It was hunting him. Whispers of freedom spread like wildfire. In the darkest corners of the prison, a plan was forming. A way out. A way to snatch Malakai from the jaws of death row. Maps of guard rotations. Blueprints of forgotten tunnels. Keys bought with blood and favors. But freedom in a place like this was never clean. Every alliance came with knives hidden behind backs. Cage believed in fighting the system, in breaking out at any cost. Malakai, though, knew better. He had lived too long among traitors to trust easily. Still, the plan moved forward. A crew began to form, men desperate enough to risk it all, men blinded by the promise of 5 million in lost diamonds. But Malakai felt it in his gut. This wasn't just a plan for escape. It was a trap waiting to be sprung. In prison, betrayal wasn't an exception. It was the rule. And soon he would learn that the deadliest enemy wasn't the guards, wasn't the warden. It was the man standing right beside him. In prison, respect was never given. It was taken. And Malakai took it the only way possible, through blood. Every ambush, every fight meant to break him, only made his legend grow. He fought with a fury that came not from survival alone, but from defiance. He would not kneel. He would not confess. He would not give the warden or the vultures circling outside the satisfaction of seeing him broken. The inmates began to whisper differently now. The label of child killer was fading, replaced by something far more dangerous, a man too hard to kill. Even those who hated him couldn't deny the truth. Malakai was becoming untouchable. Cage saw it, the gangs saw it, even DeLuca saw it. Within the iron cage of brutality, Malakai had forged something no rumor could destroy, fear in his enemies and reluctant respect from everyone else. But respect in a place like this always came with a cost, and Malakai knew the bill would soon come due. In the silence of his cell, with bruises burning and blood dried on his hands, Malakai began to face the one battle he couldn't fight with fists, the one inside himself. For years, his life had been ruled by violence, greed, and betrayal. But now, staring down the clock of execution, he was forced to confront questions he had buried beneath gun smoke and shadows. What if this was the end? What if all he left behind was pain? It was in that darkness that DeLuca found him one night, slipping a small Bible through the bars. At first, Malakai laughed, dismissing it as a false hope. But when the walls closed in and sleep became torment, he opened it. And for the first time in years, he read words not about power or survival, but about forgiveness. He wasn't a saint. He wasn't even innocent. Yet something in those pages lit a spark, a reminder that even the condemned could find redemption. And though the prison still called him a monster, Malakai discovered something unexpected in the shadows, the faint glimmer of faith. Not everyone outside had forgotten Malakai. Word reached the streets, and soon an old name resurfaced: Santos. He wasn't a friend, not really. He was a survivor, a hustler who once ran with Malakai when the diamonds first disappeared. When Santos gathered the old gang, the room filled with greed and suspicion. They remembered the heist, the betrayal, and the fortune still buried somewhere in Malakai's silence. To them, breaking him out wasn't about loyalty. It was about payback and profit. We get him out, we get the diamonds. Simple. Santos's words cut through the smoke, but nothing was ever simple. The gang was fractured, full of grudges and bad blood. Each man had his own agenda, his own reason for wanting Malakai free or dead. Meanwhile, in the prison yard, Malakai sensed movement beyond the walls. Visitors whispered warnings. DeLuca caught wind of strange names appearing in the visitor logs, and for the first time Malakai realized his fate wasn't just in the warden's hands anymore. Santos was coming, and with him came the ghosts of a past Malakai could never escape. The walls of the prison tightened every day, but freedom whispered through cracks in the concrete. One night, Malakai was pulled into a secret meeting. Cage at his side, a group of men leaned close, voices low, eyes burning with greed. The deal was simple: help us and we'll help you. They spoke of keys smuggled in, blind spots in the guard towers, a route through forgotten tunnels beneath the prison. But the price wasn't freedom alone. They wanted the diamonds. Malakai listened, silent as stone. He knew every word dripped with betrayal. These men didn't want him free. They wanted him used. Still, the offer lingered in his mind. Execution was days away. The system was tightening the noose. If he stayed, he died. If he trusted them, he might live. But at what cost? Later, in the solitude of his cell, DeLuca asked the question that haunted him. If you walk out of here, will you ever truly be free? Or will they chain you with greed the moment you step outside? Malakai didn't answer, because deep down he knew sometimes freedom was just another kind of prison. Warden Kowalsk played his prison like a puppet theater, pulling strings with cruelty and precision. To the guards, he was untouchable authority. To the inmates, he was the executioner hiding behind a desk. But to Malakai, he revealed his true face, a man consumed by greed. Behind closed doors, Kowalsk struck deals with criminals on the outside, whispering promises of wealth if they delivered him the diamonds. At the same time, he dangled survival in front of Malakai, demanding half the treasure in exchange for a delayed execution. It was a double game: set the gangs loose, squeeze Malakai from every angle, and in the end, collect the reward while leaving broken bodies in his wake. But Kowalsk underestimated the one thing he couldn't control: Malakai's will. Even bloodied, even cornered, Malakai didn't break. Instead, he studied the warden, memorized his patterns, and waited. Because Malakai knew the truth. Men like Kowalsk always played too many games, and sooner or later, they lost control of the board. The prison was drowning in rumors. Every corridor echoed with the same word: diamonds. Some swore Malakai had hidden them in Vegas. Others claimed they were buried in the desert. A few whispered he had stashed them with someone on the outside. Each lie carried weight, turning inmates against each other, twisting allies into enemies. Some wanted to use Malakai as leverage. Others wanted him dead so they could claim the treasure themselves. The pressure mounted with every passing day. Malakai endured beatings, interrogations, endless threats, all for something he might not even have. Still, he stayed silent. DeLuca pleaded with him. If you know where they are, tell me. I can help you. But Malakai only shook his head. They're chasing shadows. Even if I gave them an answer, it wouldn't set me free. Meanwhile, outside the walls, Santos fanned the flames, promising the crew a share of the fortune if they risked everything to break Malakai out. The truth was simple. Nobody really knew where the diamonds were. But lies had built a fire too big to put out, and that fire was about to consume them all. The air inside the prison was different that night, thicker, charged, like the walls themselves were holding their breath. The guards tightened patrols. Inmates whispered in corners, trading cigarettes and secrets. Everyone knew something was coming. Malakai sat in his cell, staring at the clock. Midnight loomed, the deadline the warden had given him. Half the diamonds and/or an early execution. But Malakai had made his choice. He would not bend. Then the lights flickered. The sound of boots thundered in the hallways. Cell doors clanged open where they shouldn't have. Chaos erupted. Fights broke out in the yard, shanks flashing under moonlight. Smoke grenades rolled through corridors. It was a riot, but it wasn't random. This was the moment the outside crew and the inside traitors had been planning for. Malakai was shoved into the chaos, fists flying, voices screaming. Cage appeared at his side, blood running down his face, eyes blazing. "This is it, brother. One way or another, we finish it tonight." The prison had become a battlefield, and in the center of it all stood Malakai, facing the choice that would decide not only his fate, but the fate of everyone who followed him. The riot tore the prison apart. Sirens wailed, flames licked the walls, and the screams of men mixed with the crack of gunfire. In the chaos, old debts were settled, and new wars were born. For Malakai, it wasn't just survival anymore, it was vengeance. Every strike of his fists carried years of betrayal. Every broken bone a message to those who had tried to bury him alive. The gangs came for him in waves, hungry for the diamonds, desperate to claim his head. But with Cage at his back, Malakai cut through them like a storm of fury. Blood soaked the concrete. Bodies fell one after another. The warden watched from his tower, furious, realizing the chaos he had unleashed was no longer under his control. His perfect plan had turned into a wildfire. Malakai stood in the center of the carnage, his chest heaving, his eyes burning with fire. For the first time, he wasn't just fighting to survive, he was fighting to end this. And in that moment, the most feared gangster in the prison became something even greater. The man everyone feared they could never break. The prison was a war zone, doors broken, alarms howling, fire spilling through the corridors. Amid the chaos, Malakai pushed forward, every step leaving blood in his wake. Cage fought at his side, a brother forged not by loyalty, but by survival. They reached the outer gate, but freedom was never meant to come cheap. Guards armed with shotguns lined the walls, the warden barking orders with desperation in his voice. "Kill him! Don't let him out alive!" Bullets tore the night. Cage went down in the storm. His last words rasped through blood. "Don't waste it! Get out!" Malakai pressed on, rage and grief burning hotter than the fire behind him. With one final surge, he crashed through the barriers, disappearing into the darkness beyond the prison walls. But freedom carried its own chains. The world outside still wanted the diamonds. The lies would follow him. The past would hunt him. He had won his life back, but at a price written in blood. As dawn broke, Malakai stood alone on the horizon. Not a prisoner, not a victim, but a man scarred by vengeance, haunted by secrets, and bound to a truth only he knew. The most feared gangster had escaped the prison, but his real war had only just begun.